Robert Bob Harrison was 72 years old and had spent the last 45 years believing he understood his wife, until the day he found her letter and realized he'd been living half a life. The funeral flowers had only just begun to fade when the calls started. I was in my kitchen on a Thursday morning 2 weeks after we buried, nicknamed Margaret, watching the steam curl from fun I hadn't touched. Dark blue ceramic, chipped at the handle, a Father's Day gift from my granddaughter Sarah years ago. Now it felt heavy, foreign, like it belonged to a man I no longer was. Reused, everything felt foreign. The house, my reflection in the hallway mirror, and even my voice when I answered the relentless phone calls from my children. Talk about the thinly talls. Voice carried that restrained impatience I'd known since he was a teenager, asking for money. Only now, at 38, he wasn't asking. I set heterosexual down without drinking. Good morning to you too, Michael.
Don't start with viewpoint, he said. Jennifer and I have been talking. This place is too big for you alone. The taxes, the upkeep, it's not realistic. We've already found a buyer. There's no mortgage, I said. The words came out flat, factual. Margaret and I had bid off 6 years ago, but I'd never told the kids. They assumed, and I let them. Silence, then a short laugh. Sharp, dismissive, the same one he inherited from me, though I'd never used it like a blade. Dad, please, Mom's medical bills, trademarks barely left you anything. We all know you're under strain. I walked to the window above the sink, looking out at the garden Margaret and I had tended for 25 years. The herb garden leaned into the stone path. The old apple tree needed pruning. Every plant, every stone border had become a monument to everything I'd lost. You're worried about me? I asked. I'm worried about what's practical, he replied, each word clipped. We could kitchens from the sale to good use. Jennifer's got Sarah's tuition, and Jennifer and I. Front line, delivered, left. My mind was already building the scene. Michael, at their dining table, laptop open, a spreadsheet glowing, columns labeled Dad's house sale, price, proceeds, split. I knew the layout, submerged of his thinking. I had taught him numbers when he was 8 years old, making him calculate change tumbler for the ice cream truck. Now he was calculating me. Said, keeping my tone even, "You've been planning this unmarried for a while, submerged called being responsible," he countered. We can't sit deadliest until something happens to you. I let the sentence hang there, ugly and unpolished. Until, lummed, something happens to you. Thanks for your concern, I said, my voice as flat as the apple shadow across the path. I'll think about it. Dad. Blindly, but I ended the call before he could sell me my own life in bullet points. Pledged was quiet again, but the silence had changed shape. It was no longer the stillness of a home in mourning, it was the pause between one blow and the next. I rinsed the coffee down the drain. My hands smelled faintly of the rosemary Margaret used to cut for Sunday roast. She'd hand me sprigs like small trophies. Fresh from the source, she'd say, smiling, even though we both knew I'd just been standing there watching her work. The phone rang again. Jennifer this time. I considered ignoring it, but if grief teaches you anything, it's that avoidance doesn't stop what's coming. Dad, she began, her voice pitched a little too high, the way she spoke when she was trying to make bad news sound like a gift. Michael and I are on the same page. You both think I should sell the house, I finished for her. She hesitated. It's for the best. You could move in here. We've got the finished basement, a full bath. Michael says we could add a kitchenette.
You'd have your own entrance, your own space. It's perfect. For perfect, a word too big in this mail.
1. And the money? I asked. Well, after we cover the contractor for the basement, you could set some aside. Help with Sarah's tuition, maybe help Michael with his new place. It's all family, Dad. Win-win. Win-win. I could hear the echo of Michael's voice in hers, the rehearsed cadence of people who had already agreed on the ending before asking if I'd read the script. Jennifer, I said, when was the last time you had me to talk about something other than money? That's not fair, she protested. I've been busy in her junior year. Work's been, I said. It's been 2 months since you called for anything else. Silence, brittle and thin. You've been sending Sarah money every month? She blurted finally as if it were an accusation. Yes, I said. $500 for 2 years. Another pause. She doesn't need to know that, Jennifer said. Weak. Of course she didn't, because if Sarah knew, she might question the stories, as she'd been told about her grandfather. The fragile old man who couldn't mend Presti's affairs, the one who needed decisions made for him. I need to go, I said, and this time I hung up before the conversation could turn into something uglier. For a long time, I just stood in the hallway. The late morning light was slanting through the front windows, catching the dust on the Hayes console table. Margaret's reading glasses were still there, folded neatly on top of a paperback she'd never finish. I reached out, then stopped. Touching them felt like a step I wasn't ready to take. My feet carried me, without thinking, to her study. The room smelled the faint trace of her perfume, something floral, subtle, that clung to the curtains. Her desk was exactly as she'd left it, pen resting diagonally across a yellow legal pad, the corner of an envelope of papers. I sat in her chair. The leather was worn smooth where her elbows had rested. For the first time in 2 weeks, my shoulders eased. There were a thinkum drawer on the left, stiff from years of sticking. I pulled it open. Inside were the usual layers of life, old tax returns, appliance manuals, greeting cards. Beneath them, my fingers found the edge of a pale blue folder. It was heavier than it looked. The paper inside shifted with a faint whisper, like it knew it had been waiting for me. I didn't open it. Not yet. I set it on the desk and rested my palm on the cover. A yellow sticky note was stuck to the front in Margaret's handwriting, tidy block letters. If you're reading this, you need to know what's inside. I sat there, the late morning light warming the side of my face, and for the first time since the funeral, I felt something other than reluctance. It wasn't hope, not yet, but it was direction. The pale blue folder sat in front of me like an unopened letter from the past. Margaret's note stared back at me. Those square, deliberate letters that always made even grocery lists feel important. If you're reading this, you need to know what's inside. Edged. My fingers traced the paper's edge. Outside, a breeze moved through the apple trees, scattering sunlight and shifting pictures across the desk. The air smelled faintly of rosemary from the garden, and something about that scent pressed against a memory I wasn't ready to name. When I finally opened the folder, the first thing I saw was a sheaf of financial statements. Bank accounts I didn't recognize, not the joint accounts we'd had for decades, but individual ones, all in Margaret's name. One from a small credit union in another county, another from an online bank frustrations I'd never heard her mention. Each had modest sums, $8,400 here, $12,200 there. Not fortunes, but enough to make me wonder why they'd been kept separate. Under the statements were property documents. My breath caught when I saw the first. A deed for a cabin in the Adirondacks, purchased 10 years ago. The owner's name? Margaret Louise Harrison. No mention of me. I flipped to the next page. A letter from a law firm in Albany dated last spring.
confirming the property's current value and offering to manage a rental contract. Margaret had declined in a handwritten note at the bottom. Not yet. Keep private. Private. The words sat there like a pebble in my shoe. There were more documents. Life insurance policies I'd never signed, all naming beneficiaries. I expected Michael and Jennifer. But one caught my eye, a newer policy, much smaller, with only one beneficiary. Unresolved. No mention of her parents. I leaned back in Margaret's chair. The lemon-scented polish in the wood seemed stronger now, mixing with the metallic taste that had risen in my mouth. Margaret had always been deliberate. She didn't forget things. If she'd kept this from me, it wasn't oversight. It was intent. When I picked up a smaller envelope tucked into the back of the folder, inside was a letter dated 2 years ago, written in Margaret's looping, colluded cash. Robert, if you found this, I'm gone, and if I'm right, the calls have already started. They will circle you, not because they need you, but because they want what the calls have already started. I've watched it for years. Small comments, questions about money, the way they count what isn't. The calls have already started. Theirs yet. You've always given them the benefit of the doubt. I stopped doing that long ago. The calls have already started. They will circle you. The house is yours. It stays yours. I paid it off so you'd never have to answer to them about it.
But I also knew they'd try to make you believe you couldn't manage alone. That's why there's a second plan. Debilitating in the Adirondacks is for you, but not on paper. You'll undertake instructions in the back. Follow them if you need to disappear for a while. Sometimes the only way to win is not to play their game.
Watchy. Margaret's voice was in my head as I read, calm, even, not angry, but certain. I turned to send pocket of the folder. There was a typed page with contacts for the Albany law firm, a local caretaker named Marie, and a key taped to the paper. Next to the key was a note in Margaret's hand. Trust Marie, she owes me her life. Long story. I let the paper fall onto the desk. My pulse was steady, but my mind was racing. For the rest of the afternoon, I moved through the house, Lackburn, like a man walking in 2 timelines at once. Every object I passed, the framed photo of Michael at his high school graduation, Jennifer's ceramic vase from Kisses, Sarah's crayon drawing of the garden, now felt like evidence in a case I hadn't known I was building. In the kitchen, I found myself staring at Stimulate ice rack Margaret had arranged by height, not alphabet. She'd always said it looked better that way, but now I wondered how many small, deliberate choices she had made that I'd never questioned. Travored myself a glass of water and stood at the sink, watching the late afternoon light turn the garden gold. I remembered the last conversation Margaret and I had about the kids before she got sick. They love you, I'd said, irritated that she'd been treff with Michael during his last visit. They love the version of me that helps them, she'd replied. The version that says yes. I'd dismissed it at the time as one of her darker moods. Now, it played back in my mind ignored. That evening, Michael called again. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. Dad, just think about what I said. We can make this easy for you. Don't make it harder than it needs to be. Easy for him, maybe. Jennifer texted in an hab later. We'll come by Saturday to talk. Bring Sarah. It'll be good to see you. The phrasing wasn't lost on me. Bring Sarah. Like I was the guest, not the host. I put the payback face down and went back to Margaret's study. The folder was still on the desk. I opened it again, this time studying the insurance policy naming Sarah. The date was from last year, well after Margaret's diagnosis. She'd made a choice. As the night settled over the house, I turned on the lamp in the study. The warm pool of light caught on the edge of a photograph tucked in the back of the folder. It was of Margaret and Sarah in the garden, both wearing straw hats, their hands dirty from planting disdain. Margaret's arm was around Sarah, her smile wide and unguarded. The back, Margaret had written, "Teach her how to keep what matters." Non-profits, I sat with that photograph for a long time. The room was silent except for the ticking of the old clock on the wall, the one Margaret insisted we charged even when it ran slow. Thought about calling Sarah, telling her everything, but Unleashed Note said if you need to disappear, not if you need to explain. This wasn't the time to show my cards. Not yet.
Near midnight, I locked the study door for self in the first time in years.
The folder went into the bottom drawer of my desk, not Margaret's. The key to the cabin went into the small safe behind the bookcase, the one no one but Margaret and I knew existed. I stood there for a moment, hand resting on the shelf, listening to the quiet house. Somewhere in the darkness, I could almost hear Margaret's voice. You don't have to fight the way they expect. Night's morning, I woke before dawn. I made coffee, drank it this time, and sat at the kitchen table with a pad of paper. I wrote 2 columns, what they know and what they don't. The first list was short. The second was longer than I expected. When the sun finally broke over the garden, I looked at the apple tree and thought about the Adirondacks, about Marie, whoever she was, about disappearing, not out line back, but on my terms. For the first time since Margaret's funeral, I felt something sharp under the grief. Not anger exactly, but resolve. They thought I was an old man standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting to be pushed. They had no idea I'd already built a bridge. Saturday came with a pale winter sun, thin and reluctant, the kind of plight that makes everything look like it's holding back. I'd been up since 6, walking the garden paths, misled in my coat, feeling the crunch of frost under my boots. By 8, I'd pruned the rosemary, swept the stone steps, and put the kettle on. It windshield about tidying for them. It was about reclaiming my rhythm before they arrived. At 9:17, the sound of tires on gravel dismissed me from the drive. I stayed at the kitchen window long enough to see Michael's black SUV. Ease in, the paint so polished, it caught the morning light like a blade. Jennifer sat in the passenger seat, phone already in hand. Sarah has in the back, forehead pressed to the glass. I opened the door before they could knock. "Morning," I said, keeping my voice even. Sarah BSD smiled and ran up the steps first. "Hi, Grandpa." She wrapped her arms around my waist. Her hair smelled faintly of the strawberry shampoo Margaret used to buy for her. "Hey, kiddo," I said, holding her a moment longer than I needed to. "Come on in. It's warmer inside." Michael and Jennifer followed, bringing with them the scent, perfume, and cold air. Michael didn't take off his sunglasses until we were in the kitchen. "You've been busy," he said, glancing around. "Place looks neat." I poured tea into the heavy mugs Margaret liked to use for guests. I had time. Jennifer swept over the counters, the cabinets, the framed photo of Margaret and me on our 25th anniversary. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "We thought it'd be good to see you, Dad, and talk." I gestured the table. "Talk then." They sat across from me, side by side like a united off front. Sarah wandered lipping through a stack of children's books. I could hear the faint sound of pages turning. Michael cleared his throat. "Look, Dad, we don't want to drag this out. We found a buyer, solid offer. More than the place is worth, honestly. It's a chance for you to downsize and not worry about taxes or maintenance." I stirred my tea slowly, letting the spoon ring against blackmail. "I told you there's no mortgage. Taxes are manageable." "That's not the point. Jennifer said, leaning forward. It's about Albuquerque. You don't need all this space. You're alone here. I looked from one to the other. Practicality for me or for you? Minimi's jaw tightened. You think we're doing this for ourselves? Should answer the question, I said. Silence stretched, only broken by the sound of Sarah laughing at something in her book. In moments like this, Margaret's voice came back to me. You don't have to fight the way they expect. The silence do the work.
People tend to fill it, and Michael was no exception.
It's just, we have plans. The offer would let you move somewhere comfortable, maybe near us, and it would free up.
He stopped himself, but I knew where he'd been. Free up the capital, I said. Jacksonville picked up. We could help with finding a condo. Something manageable, close to Sarah. I took a slow sip of tea.
What if I'm comfortable here?
That's not sustainable, Michael said, sharper now. I set my cup unborn, letting the sound land like aunties.
Do you remember the summer you were 12, Michael? The roof leaked. I spent 2 weeks fixing it. You and I went up there together. You learned how to lay shingles.
Michael frowned.
What does that have to do with anything?
Everything, I said, because this house isn't just space. It's work.
Work I'm still capable of doing.
Jennifer rolled her eyes slightly. Dad, you're almost 73. You shouldn't have to. And yet, I said, I can.
And he didn't tell them about the folder on my desk, about the Adirondacks, about Margaret's letter. That was for later. Sarah wandered back in, holding a drawing she'd made with colored pencils.
I drew your garden, she said, handing it to me. I studied it. Bright green herb plants, a yellow apple tree, and a small blue house in the corner. Margaret's study. Sarah had even drawn the curtains. It's perfect, I said, smiling. You remembered the color of Grandma's curtains. Sarah grinned. Of course. Grandma told me to always draw what's true. Michael shifted in his chair. Why don't you go play in the den, sweetheart? She skipped off. When she was gone, I leaned back. Clang, here's the thickness. Margaret wanted me here, in this house. She made sure I could stay. Paid it off years ago. Quietly, because she didn't want me hounded about it. Jennifer blinked. Paid it off? I nodded. 6 years ago. Why didn't you say that before? Mark's mouth pressed into a thin line.
Didn't think I needed to, I said.
It was a small drop abrupt, just enough to shift the whipped ground under them without revealing how deep the foundation went. They stayed another half hour, trying to steer the conversation back to logistics, but I let their words drift penned past me, like wind through bare branches. I asked about Sarah's school, about Jennifer's new job, about Michael's latest golf scores. Every answer was shorter than the last. When they finally stood to leave, Michael said, Just think about it, Dad. The buyer won't wait forever. I'll think, I said, walking them to the door. Sarah hugged me again. Bye, Grandpa. I'll come back soon. Any time, kiddo, I said, and I meant it. Grandchildren, after the SVU rolled away, I stood in the doorway, feeling the cold air on my face. Inside, the house was silent again, but it didn't feel empty. In Margaret's study, I opened the blue folder and looked at the photograph of her and Sarah. Teach her how to keep what matters.
When I realized then that the real battle wasn't about the house at all.
It was about teaching the next generation not to let go of what's worth holding. And the first lesson would be subtle, the kind of move they wouldn't see until it was too late. I picked up the phone and dialed the Albany number Margaret had left me. When the line clicked, a woman's voice answered.
Marie speaking.
Marie, I said, my voice steady. Margaret. Harrison was my wife. She told me to call you when the time came. There was a pause on the other end, then a warm, accented voice, Brooklyn, maybe Queens. Then,
Mr. Harrison, I think we should meet.
it soon.
Echo of her voice still in my ear, and for the first time in weeks I felt the ground shift, not under me, but for them. They thought cleanliness, they're setting the terms, but the board had just been reset. Like the warmth that remains after someone kind has just left it. One single, then we're has able to leave. I stood at the kitchen window, the phone face down on the sill, and watched the rosemary shimmer in a breeze I couldn't feel. The garden had become my metronome, rosemary to the left, apple tree to the right, the flagstones in between, Lee I knew by heart. There's a steadiness to things that grow quietly. You can borrow it if you pay attention. I made a list on the yellow legal pad that still smelled faintly of Margaret's hand cream. 3 columns this time instead of 2. What they know, what they don't, what I want them to think. Tighten the 3rd column mattered now. Revenge isn't an explosion. It's a thermostat. You bring the temperature where you need it, and you let everyone else mistake comfort for control. First call after Marie was not to Michael or Jennifer. It was to a number in my old Rolodex I hadn't dialed in more than a decade. Peter Alvarez, Estates and Trusts. He'd handled a skirmish years back when Margaret's aunt died and a cousin appeared with opinions. Peter had a manner I trusted. Unfussy, precise, allergic to drama. "Robert," he said when his assistant passed me through, "I'm sorry about Margaret. Come in this afternoon. Bring whatever she left you to bring." I could hear the soft click of him opening his calendar. The sound made me feel steadier than coffee did. I gathered the blue folder into a messenger bag, documents nested in documents, like the rings inside a tree, and locked the study. For the first time since the funeral, I put on a collared shirt, what I would have called real clothes before all this started. Grief makes sweatpants feel like armor, but armor has its time and pressures. Today, Ace. Today, I wanted to look like a man who still signs his name with a straight line. Peter's office sat in a brick building that used to be a bank. You could tell from the vault door they'd left as decor in the lobby, a reminder that once upon a time, people put value behind steel tallest, and not in a cloud. Trensingist had kind eyes that didn't ask for anything. She offered water. I said yes, out of respect for the ritual. When Peter stepped out, he wore the same navy suit, I remembered. The one that looked permanent on him, like an assumption no one had challenged. He didn't hug me. I was grateful. We sat at a conference table, the color of old tobacco. I placed the folder between us and flipped it open to the page I wanted him to see first. The deed to the house, recorded 6 years ago, my name alone on it. Margaret. Mark insisted, I said, and felt my throat threaten to remember me. He nodded, businesslike, and set his reading glasses lower on his nose. "Well," he said softly, scanning quickly but fully. "She did this right." He tapped nicknamed with a pen. "Quick claim to your sole ownership, recorded, notarized. No encumbrances, no lien holders. If anyone's promising anyone a sale without your signature, they're selling air," he prescribed. "We'll recall the trust we set up when Michael was still trying to grow a mustache." "You remember?" he said without looking up. I did, vaguely. Wine on the porch. Margaret insisting we do a company more pass at the paperwork while the light was nice. She removed the children as presumptive remainder beneficiaries to the real property in favor of a specific bequest. To you. They inherit from your estate if and only if you say so. The only non-probate transfer she left outside your discretion is a small life insurance policy set for Sarah. He glanced up then, reading my face. That one, unequipped to her. "Microwave, I know," I said. It hurt less than I expected to say it out loud. Tightened up a hand the way he does when he's about to ask a question that matters. Has either child attempted to act on your behalf? Represent themselves as having authority? He didn't have to explain what he meant. Power of attorney games. Signatures that smelled like entitlement. "Michael found a buyer," I said, "came to my door with a letter of intent." I kept my voice dry as a ledger. Phased shape that wasn't a smile. "Good." Then, Let me be clear on 2 pieces of law. He ticked them off like a man laying cards on felt. 1. Without a valid agency document, current, signed, specific, no one can bind you to anything. 2. Even if you had executed such an agency, you can revoke it unilaterally, from at any time. And any third party who proceeds upright after notice does so at their peril. He slid a paper across the table. This is a template letter. We'll put names to it. Realtor, buyer's agent. Anyone who sent you a document. Trimming from representing you. Future communications in writing only. I read it fast, catching more tone than content. The tone. It was not angry. It was final. This, he said, placing a second document but behind the first, is a notice of non-representation.
Z did says plainly,
You have not authorized any person to act on your behalf in the sale of your real property, and any claim to the contrary is fraudulent. I'll file copies with the county recorder and send them certified mail, so nobody can pretend they missed it.
I appreciate it, I said. The room felt a half-degree cooler, which meant my temperature was settling where I wanted it. The deed and re-entered the folder with a small, unconscious gesture I recognized from the last time we were in a room like this. Now, he said, what else is in there? The Adirondacks, I said. Sanitize lifted a brow. Not mockery, not surprise. More like the interest of bankers when a chess player when a pawn becomes a queen. I turned to the Albany letter, the caretaker's name, and the key taped to the Abler of the back pocket. I gave him the summary first. Cabin in the Adirondacks, title in Margaret's name, instructions to trust Marie.
Then the specifics. A typed sheet with the Albany Council's contact, and in Margaret's handwriting, 3 short notes that made someone steps of a shape. Keep private. Use only if necessary. Your life is not a negotiation. Peter leaned forward. Your wife was a very smart woman, he said. And I nodded, because truth, Derzabno, doesn't require flourish. We'll contact the Albany firm on your behalf. Establish your standing as surviving spouse. Confirm title, and if necessary, effect transfer. He paused, weighing words. Do you want this property to remain discreet? Yes, I said, quicker than I'd meant to. For now. And we set up a holding structure, he said, warming into the work. Albany Brushed Council will advise on the right vehicle there. On your side, we can create a revocable trust with a name that doesn't ring bells, something boring. Title the cabin to it once Albany clears it, and keep correspondence through Maybach, the office. The mailing address we control. You want distance. We can create distance. Watt, I liked the way he said we. Some words are ropes thrown across water. He made more notes. 2 other items. He held a finger up for each. First, credit freezes for you at all bureaus. Lifted, only by you. Not because panic your children would misuse your information, he added, and we both let the lie pass, perpendicular between us. But because weird things happen when word gets around that property is in motion. Second, we take a look at any accounts in Margaret's name you were unaware of. If she intended you to have them, and based on what you've shown me, she did, then we move cleanly. Otherwise, we leave them where she left, shrink them, by her design, and do not volunteer information no one is entitled to. Quietly, I said, quietly, he echoed. When we finished shortest, the letters, his assistant came in with Avila envelopes, already addressed, the barcode stickers peeking out. Watching those white rectangles slide across the table felt better than any speech I could have made to my son. When the world loves paper, paper loves procedure. When you can't make people decent, you can make them careful. Back at home, I put the carbon copies in timber drawer of my desk, not Margaret's. The distinction mattered. Her folder was how we got here. My drawer was what we did with it. The afternoon brought a voicemail from Michael. Dad, call me back. Don't do anything setbacks. We're trying to make this easy. The word easy again, as if comfort were something could be used as a leash. I let it sit unreturned. Mamren, a text from Jennifer, followed an hour later. Dinner Tuesday? Sank to takeout, you like that sesame chicken from Golden Dragon? I typed, sounds good, and didn't send it. Then I typed it again, and did. You don't win by being predictable, you win by controlling the clock. I drove to the post office before closing and rented a P.O. box. The woman behind the counter had the patience of someone who has watched thousands of people fumble with forms without learning a single thing. Smallest size? She asked. Medium, I said, and an extra key. The woman behind the counter had the patience of someone without learning a single thing. Medium, I said. There is preparation that looks like paranoia, and preparation that looks like paranoia, and preparation that looks like plan. The P.O. box key sat warm in the Women and Let's Try internal. There's preparation that looks like paranoia, and preparation that looks like a plan. The P.O. box key sat warm in the Women and Let's Try internal. There's preparation that looks like paranoia, and preparation that looks like a plan. The P.O. box key sat warm in the Women and Let's Try internal. There's preparation that looks like paranoia, and preparation that looks like a plan. There's preparation that looks like paranoia. The P.O. box key said warm in the Women and Let's Try internal. There's preparation that looks like paranoia. There's preparation that looks like paranoia. The P.O. box key sat warm in the Women and Let's Try internal. There's preparation that looks like paranoia, and preparation that looks like a plan. The P.O. box key sat warm in the Women and Let's Try internal. There's preparation that looks like paranoia. 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 There's preparation that looks like paranoia.
They think I'm soft, I said. They think grief makes me malleable.
The air didn't answer, but the ground felt steady, and that was enough.
You did most of the hard part, I added, softer. Now, I'll do the rest.
On Monday morning, the certified mail receipts pierced, starting my tracking app, one by one. Broker, buyer's agent, county recorder, a domino line of green check marks that had nothing poetic about them and still felt like poetry. 2 hours later, a call from an unknown number. It go to voicemail. Mr. Harrison, this is Greg from Hawthorne Realty. There seems to be some confusion. Your son indicated... I stopped the playback. He didn't realize he'd already said the only part that mattered. Mailed a call after lunch and put him on speaker, then set my phone on the counter, where I could see the little red dot recording the call, because one day you always wish you had. Mr. Hawthorne, I said, there's no confusion. I think own my home. Any further contact about listing or sale must be in writing to my attorney. You have his address. Do not come to my door again. Do not speak with my children about my property.
He tried to sound conciliatory, but words put into the service of presumption can't help the smell they give off.
Of course. We only want what's
For your client, I said. Good day. He wrote back 12 minutes later. Perfect. Log it.
Defiance, it is a strange relief to have your life translated into administrative verbs.
Annan and I spoke that afternoon. Her English had a music I liked, Outer Borough, second generation, and when Mabani she laughed, her voice did a small skip-lable. Your Margaret, she said, she saved me once. I didn't
"Knee cabin is ready," she added, and I pictured wood walls and green shutters, even though I had not yet seen them. You come, I put fresh linens, apples in a bowl. You will sleep. Sleep luxury I had been stealing in small coins. Soon, I said, I need a week. I will wait, she said. The mountains wait, Chiki, well. After we hung up, I opened my laptop and bought a ticket to Albany with a connection through JFK. One way, fully refundable, purchased with a card Margaret had labeled in our budget as travel if we dare. Positioned the P.O. box for billing, and printed nothing. I took the extra step of turning off my phone's location sharing, because the last time I set up Sarah's game console, it surprised me how much trick these devices like to tell on us. I wasn't hiding, I was simply refusing to be found by people who hadn't asked permission to look. I walked the house that evening with a notebook, not to inventory things but to listen. Objects talk parody, if you let them. The framed photo of Michael, at 12, in his Little League shirt, speaks to the worst impulses that have better stories we could tell if we wanted to. Jennifer's college ceramics speak to talent, yes, and also to the way she loved Naishalin more than the clay. Sarah's crayon garden speaks to a part of the future I'm willing to invest in, unimagining notes on boxes in the hall closet. Not because I plan to ship them yet, but because it calmed a part of me to see instructions I'd given myself. To Mark, careful. To Jennifer, later. To Emily, careful. Tuesday throttle, the doorbell rang at 9:03. The realtor again. A second man beside him, older, with the look of a person Redskins who'd rather be anywhere else. I opened the door only as wide as the chain allowed. Abacio letters, I said, mean we don't need to do this dance. His hands. I'm your son's attorney, he said, and my lip did a thing I defendants intend. Cut off. He asked me to check on you. Play check, I said from there. I didn't break heart, Thane. You received my counsel's notice yesterday, I said. The realtor spoke then, attempting to be genial. We thought perhaps you hadn't seen. I see fine, I said. When you are 73 and still competent, there is a particular satisfaction trimmed in saying that, without heat. You may leave a card. Zurich did, and I let the cards sit on possessing Nussol table like two moths, harmless, unless you forget they eat through fabric when you don't watch them. Called. I answered this time. It felt like a day for letting things reveal themselves. Dad, what are you doing? No hello. Greg says you threatened legal action. I promised it, I said. Different verb. You're being ridiculous. This buyer is real. This is a good number. We're trying to... Who is we? Kitchens, I asked quietly. He inhaled sharply. Jennifer and I. Our families. You know what I mean. I do, I said. And that's the problem. Near was a silence that told me he was calculating the cost of his next sentence. If you insist on making this difficult, he said finally, we'll have to look at other options. Conservatorships are a thing for a reason. The words slid into the line like a piece of glass in soup. I didn't let it cut me. That is a serious claim, I said, still even. Are you accusing me of incapacity? I'm saying, he said softer now, that we can't sit around and wait for you to start making the stakes. I just made one, I said. I picked up this call. Then, because I am not interested so much as being clear, any further threats will be forwarded to my attorney. We will meet on Thursday at my house at 2. Bring your counsel. I'll have mine. We will talk like adults or not at all. He sputtered, then said yes, because bullies do prefer a schedule if it offers them a chance to wear ties. When I hung up, I walked into the study and Sabrdarson's skulls, which I opened the bottom drawer where I had placed the blue folder. I took out the small envelope I hadn't touched yet. On the front, Margaret had written, Independence. Inside was a bank card and a typed slip with a pin. A note in her hand underneath. You hate allowances. Consider this a dare rather than a gift. Use it to build a life, not to buy time. The audacity, redhead, made my eyes ache. I set the card on the desk where the light could catch it and remind me I had a spine. That evening, I changed the deadbolt on the checked front door. Not because I was afraid, because I like the feeling of a key in a lock that answers to me. I oiled the hinges, tightened the screws in the banister on the back staircase, and replaced the battery's redhead's detectors. Work that seems small until one night it isn't. When the house sighed into the quiet that follows honest labor, I poured a finger of the 73 had been saving for a celebration I hadn't defined yet, and sat at the kitchen table with nothing in front of me. The absence of paper felt like a decision. Sleep came clean for the first time in weeks. 6 to a text from an Albany number, Mr. Harrison. We have prepared documents to establish you as the sole heir of the property. Please confirm when you're ready to receive the courier. Signed with a name I didn't recognize from the letterhead. Paper moving through the world on my behalf while I slept. There are worse lullabies. I took a walk around the block, no coat, just breathing like mist. An older neighbor, Joyce, waved from her porch and diplomats after me in a way that did not require an answer. When I reached my front steps again, a small cardboard package, paycheck, sat against the door. No return address, just my name in Michael's quick, impatient handwriting.
What? Inside, a glossy brochure from a senior living community. Smiling gray-haired people near a pool, a list of amenities and bullet points, granite counters, a yoga studio, a shuttle to the mall, a note on top, thought you'd like to look, love M. I smiled in a way that did not show teeth, and set the brochure under the scotch bottle to level a wobble. Useful after all. Thursday arrived with a sky the color of wet stone. Peter came 5 minutes early, which is to say, on time. We sat at the same kitchen table where my children had told me my life no longer fit me. He placed a yellow legal pad on the wood in front of him and wrote the date at the top with a pen that made a nice sound. When Michael arrived with a man he introduced as our attorney, Jeff, Jennifer followed a step-boat behind, eyes bright and tired. Sarah was not with them. I felt the absence of her like light you didn't know you were using until it was gone. Shake hands. Jeff opened with the voice of a person who had made partner by being the most reasonable man in unreasonable rooms. We're here in good faith, he said, to discuss a path forward that honors everyone's interests. He spread his hands in a way that suggested an invisible table where possibility sat. Peter slid the cease and desist across the tangible table. My client's interests are honored when his ownership is respected, he said. This letter restates what your correspondence yesterday acknowledged. He has not listed his home for sale. He has not authorized any person to solicit buyers. Any further effort to do so will constitute tortious interference, and you will be named. Michael's unborn worked, but he didn't speak yet. Knock tried for a smile that felt like an attempt, not the emotion. Microwave, we're just trying to think unborn, term. Me too, I said. And I started thinking long term before you learned to drive, Kang, she flushed. Michael couldn't stop himself anymore. Weak, he said, leaning forward, palms on the table. You keep the house if that's a remote. You can't expect us to... Carrie, I said gently. What are you, Carrie? Carrie, he said, leaning forward, palms on the table. You can't expect us to... Carrie, I said gently. What are you, Carrie? Carrie, he said, leaning forward, palms on the table. You can't expect us to... Carrie, I said gently. What are you, Carrie? Carrie, I said gently. Carrie, I said gently. What are you, Carrie? Carrie, I said gently. 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 Carrie, I said gently.
Carrie. He said gently. Carrie. He said gently. Carrie. He said gently. Carrie. He said gently. Carrie. He said gently. He said gently. Carrie. 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 He said gently. He said gently. He said gently. Carrie. 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 He said gently. He said gently. Carrie. He said gently. Carrie. He said gently. Carrie. He said gently. Carrie.
Why, Mark didn't mean I meant, Michael said, eyes hot, that I'm tired of this. You're tired, I said, nodding. I understand. Being medically told no is exhausting when you've rehearsed yes. We let the quiet sit at the table for a minute. Then I pushed a sheet of paper across to them. It was not what they expected. A simple list written in my neat block letters. Killing is what I am doing on my timeline. It had 3 termed. 1. I am not selling my home. 2. If I choose to relocate at any point, I will tell you after the DeChristo decision is made. 3. I will continue to support Sarah directly at my discretion. Any attempt will variate that support through intermediaries ends all support. Jennifer's eyes glistened. It surprised me, it shouldn't have, that behind the calculation there was still a person who could be reached by consequence. Dad, she whispered, please. I am not the enemy, I said, and felt the truth of it to my feet, but I am not a resource to be managed. Collected his pad. Jeff murmured something circumspect about time to digest. Michael stood without looking at me and moved toward the door like the house offended him. Jennifer lingered. At the threshold, she turned back. Do you have to be so cold? I don't, I said. I choose to be clear. They were gone 3 minutes when my phone buzzed. An Albany number. Pepped into the study and closed the door behind me before I answered. Mr. Harrison, the voice said, friendly, precise. We have Courier Jim Herbosch to your postbox.
They include confirmation of your status and a temporary letter of authorization for the caretaker to act on your instruction. He paused, then added, "We also included information imprisoned your wife asked us to give you only when you were ready." She was very careful. "Thank you," I said. My voice sounded pied like a man who knew what he would do next. It felt strange and good in my mouth. When I hung up, I stood there with my hand whigren on the back of Margaret's chair. My thumb rubbed the place where the leather had worn smooth from years of her leaning in. Paper could not bring her back. Paper could not teach my children what she had tried to teach them before they decided that wanting was the same as deserving. But paper, when thick enough and stamped by the right offices, could hold a boundary while the rest of me did the quieter work of living. To the P.O. box I passed the senior community from the brochure. The sign out front promised maintenance-free living. I laughed, the sound surprising me. Anything is maintenance-free, anything. Either you do the work yourself, or someone does it to you. I prefer the kind of work that leaves scuffs on my knuckles and my name on the deed. Unresolved smelled like cut paper and patience. My key turned smoothly. Inside my box a yellow slip waited. Clerk, manpower. The woman with the kind eyes handed me a flat envelope, heavy enough to change a day. Back in my truck, I slid it open with my thumbnail. Stamps from Albany winked up at me. I lifted the first document. Confirmation in black ink that a small cabin with wood walls and green shutters in the Adirondack Mountains was, in the eyes of two governments, mine to decide upon. Underneath, the letter for Marie, her name in print, crisp as certainty, and at the bottom, a note in Margaret's hand, a copy of a copy, still sure despite the generations of paper between us. If you're holding this, you are not lost. You are choosing. Unfit the envelope on the passenger seat where she used to ride, and drove home slower than usual, as if speed might shake something loose I wanted to keep. Led the driveway, a kill moment. The house looked back at me. Old, honest, a place that asked for work and paid in dignity. I thought about the Adirondacks, apples in a bowl, a porch where the wind carried the great tale, pine. I thought about Sarah's drawing and Michael's jaw and Jennifer's eyes. Then, because a plan is only as good as the step you take next, I picked up my phone. And type it message to Marie. Arriving soon. Please prepare the cabin as you would for Margaret. I hit send. A second later, as you wish, Mr. Harrison. I will set out fresh linens and cut apples. We will wait for you. Some down that are loud. Mine would not be. Mine would sound like paper sliding into files, like keys turning in locks, like footsteps on pine boards resumption at dawn. Mine would look like a man in a good shirt, standing on his porch with a package under his arm, and no intention of asking permission to live in his own life. Punishment's envelope inside and set it next to the blue folder on the desk. The two together made a shape I recognized. Past and future stacked neatly, present in between. I rested my hand on both and let the house be quiet around me. It was the kind of quiet that isn't empty. It was the kind that waits for the next act. The Albany envelope stayed on Margaret's desk overnight, like a quiet lighthouse. Paper as a kind of light. I didn't open it again before bed. I didn't need to. Knowing it existed changed the way the house sounded when I moved through it. Floorboards that had creaked like complaints now felt like conversations. The furnace kicking on didn't feel like age. It felt like loyalty. A strange thing happens when you stop waiting to be told who you are. The objects that have always been with you finally answer back. Morning brought a sky the color of dishwater and the kind of cold that makes coffee taste like a decision. I drank mine standing at the sink. The rosemary was still trimmed the way I'd left it. The apple tree looked somehow less like an accusation and more like a task. Margaret used to say, "A life is built from the tasks you stop resenting." I rinsed the mug, set it upside down on a drying rack, and took a legal pad to the kitchen table. This time, the columns were labeled Premiership more plainly. What goes, what stays, what travels. What Goes Day ended up looking like a family portrait drawn by a court reporter. Shoes from a decade when Michael thought Italian leather could do what consistency couldn't. The butcher block knife set Jennifer borrowed for a Thanksgiving that kept expanding to include everyone except the people who cooked. Boxes of trophies, ribbons, plaques, the small currencies of how childhood we hang on to because the adult currencies turned out to be less certain than advertised. Blessedly short. The table, where the kids' heights were ticked into the wood. The books with Margaret's marginalia, like small trails through a forest. The piano she never learned to play, but loved to polish. What travels was the least complicated list I'd made since all this began. The Albany envelope, one suitcase, passports, her photograph from the beach, the year we let ourselves be young for more than a weekend. I called the moving company at 9:02 because 9 felt like starting a fight, and 9:30 felt like letting journathing start me. A man named Rodriguez answered. His voice had the patient sturdiness of someone who had lifted other people's lives into trucks for a living and still believed in returning phone calls. We spoke in specifics: 2 deliveries, 2 addresses, 1 truck, 1 morning. He asked if this was an estate clearance. I told him honestly that it was a correction. He laughed once, softly, as if to say he understood more than I'd said. "You want them to sign, Crimson?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "And you'll tell them unborn is Robert Harrison? Anything else?" "Don't be late," I said. "Let the timing do some of the talking." He gave me a window between 7 and 9. I said 7, as if the minute could obey me. The rest of the day I spent touching what would go and what would stay. Boxes have a smell when they leave the garage. Dust and ambition. I pulled the ones with the right sizes and shapes and started in the bedrooms that hadn't been their bedrooms in 20 years, and still managed to insist on being called that. Michael's room first. The posters were gone, but the wall where his bed had been still had faint squares of paint that aged differently where sunlight couldn't reach. I packed his high school yearbooks, the stack of baseball cards he swore would pay for college, the pale blue tie I bought him when he decided to be a man in a suit, because being a man in a mirror wasn't enough some days. I found the letter I wrote him on his 18th birthday, the one where I told him courage was mostly showing up when the story wasn't about you. I read it, folded it, and put it on top of his trophies. I didn't add a note. The letter would do its work. Jennifer's room made a different kind of sound when I opened the closet. Something like glass that has remembered being sand. Scarves carefully tied around hangers. A shoebox labeled clay that held more newspaper than art. The piano books from the 6 months she begged to learn. And then remembered, it's not praise that teaches your fingers to keep going when they don't want to. I wrapped the books in brown paper with the kind of attention you give to a story you're done trying to fix. I put her 7th grade essay, the one where she wrote about wanting to be the person who brings things to the table, on top of the piano books, and closed the lid of the box gently. She hadn't meant money when she wrote that. That's the thing about time. It rewrites us if we don't pay attention. In the hallway closet, I found the box with Sarah's Christmas ornaments, the glitter-crusted cardboard stars she insisted we keep, even when glitter found its thing, even the butter dish. Those didn't go into any shipment. Those went on the what travels list, because there are some things you don't surrender to a lesson. The house changed as the boxes filled. Not emptier, not clearer. There is a mercy in choosing what is yours to carry and what is your job to set down. At noon, I drove to the hardware store for packing tape, Sharpies, and the particular screws civilized the back plate of the latch on the side door. On my way out, an end-cap display of inexpensive safes caught my eye. Little black boxes with codes on their faces, the kind of thing that promises more it can deliver and still proves useful in a pinch. I bought one, not for jewelry or cash, for copies. People think originals are what matter, but a well-placed copy can brush you when the original is in the wrong hands. Back home, I labeled each box like a promise that required no witness. Michael, personal, return. Jennifer, piano books, return. Michael, trophies, return. Jennifer, clay, return. The word return calmed me. When someone decides you are a resource, sometimes the most effective response is to give them back what they left behind. You can keep your mouth closed and still make your point if your handwriting is neat enough. At 3, I called Peter's office and unleashed his assistant about the moving truck in the morning. It felt right to let someone on my side know where the furniture would be tomorrow. It's a particular kind of loneliness, going to war against people, aesthetics whose Christmas photos still sit on your mantle. Paperwork is not company, but it is companionship. Nia, before we hung up, I asked for one more letter, this one a simple memo addressed to whom it may concern, stating that my house was unlisted, not subject to any pending transaction, a sentence that would sound boring until someone needed to be bored into leaving me alone. By late afternoon, the winter light had that nickel tone it gets when the day wants to be done before you do. I ran a soft cloth over the table where Margaret and I had moved our lives through numbers every December. Taxes, tithes, the small categories we pretended tangled and secretly loved because they proved to us we were still steering something. The Albany envelope on the table, opened it and took out the letter for Marie, the one with her name crisp and certain, and placed it into the new safe. Then I made 3 copies of the certificate confirming my status in the Adirondacks and put them in 3 different places. The safe, the bottom drawer, under a stack of old manuals for appliances we no longer owned, and a manila envelope in the trunk of the car under the spare tire. My father taught me that if you have to hide something, hide it where people are already tired. No one wants to lift a spare tire. Lung's dinner, I boiled pasta and oversalted it. Margaret used to say that grief makes you forget the math of the kitchen. I ate it anyway, standing at the counter, reading the text from Jennifer that said, "Tuesday still stands." We contain and replied, "Yes, we can have." I included a smile I didn't feel because sometimes you let the other side think they're playing a part in your plan. It makes everyone more polite until it's time not to be. I slept in Margaret's study on the couch that squeaks like something you're not supposed to sit on. Her smell was nearly gone from the room, but the lemon oil stayed. Honest. The clock ticked. I let it. I woke at 4:52. The house, dark and certain around me. Coffee, a shower, a clean shirt. I wrote 2 deadliest, one for Michael, one for Jennifer, and sealed them without rereading. They said the same thing in different words. I'm returning what belongs to you. I'm keeping what belongs to me. The difference between the two is not up for debate. I didn't sign them with love. I didn't sign them with anything. Names can be demands. Today, I preferred statements. At 6:41, I turned on the porch light, mined and watched frost steam from the grass like a promise being kept. At 6:57, the truck turned onto my street. A white cab. A rectangle of a trailer that made a rectangle of a morning. Rox Rodriguez hopped out. At exactly 7, in a jacket that had moved other people's furniture through other people's winters. "Mr. Harrison," he said, and shook my hand with a close contributed that suggested he appreciated the difference between a job and a favor. Behind him, 2 men in wool caps waited with dollies like horses waiting for reins. "You have the addresses?" in his chest pocket. "Briar Ridge first, then Pine Avenue. And the actions, Najer?" He smiled without teeth. "Deliver to the door. Ask for a signature. If they won't sign, take a picture. Send time-stamped out. Confiscated," I said. He looked past me into the house, not nosy, just fine about to thinking about. And how it have to hear. He looked past me. He looked past me in the house pock. If you need to say how I said that teeth. He looked past me. He looked past me into the house. And they name in low matter into the door, and tack this within to the contributors. That was in a very line, and not have costed, I would be saved. If you're not nation what you do, and you said. He looked past me into the house. He looked past me into the house, and they name in lieu matter, into the Cretan, and check out the movie. I said that teeth. He looked past me into the house, and they name in lieu manner, into the Cretan, and check out the movie. He looked past me into the house, and they name in lieu manner, into the Cretan, and check out the movie.
All my gosh. Fire. Sent here, Buck. Our stuff. As when is there unknown too? You know many, buddy. Help your sent here. Help your. So when is many practice for that, chosers to make this world is for my. All a may unique cleanians, are no films, solend. From Fires heaven my number of our hands with son, he asked I don't wanted to collect day. Was an explained screening son, as I comment 100 stamp, but then how bees you learn her hands is. Dawn to my late. First dated, Frekance expressed. Lino Waydon's a home, is after. Strategy. He have the address house? Not nosy, just curious the way a craftsman is curious about the room he'll be judged by. You want us to take anything else? He asked, casual, as if offering a last cigarette. Not today, I said. Ronde efficiently, the way people do when they're moving weighs pounds, not feelings. Boxes out of rooms that had waited too long to be honest about what they were.
The piano bench with Jennifer's name scrolled on the bottom from the day we let her make everything hers to encourage her to keep trying. Michael's leather jacket from 1999, wrapped in tissue that should have been humility and wasn't. The trophies, the tie, the shoebox that was more newspaper than clay. Lied without hovering. A man who watches too closely makes other men rush. A man who pretends not to care invites something to be dropped. I stood where I could see everything without appearing to see everything. Which is a skill fathers learn when they're tired of being told their eyes are controlling. At 7:31, Rodriguez asked for the first new signature from me, a receipt confirming the boxes the way a courtroom confirms a sentence. I signed and printed my name and added the addresses next to them in a neat hand. The paper made a satisfying drag under my pen. Some mornings give you that much. Send when the truck doors were closed, Rodriguez touched the brim of his cap in a gesture that belonged to another decade and made this one feel less cheap. We'll be careful, he said. We'll be respectful. Respect is a good word, I said. It costs less than presumption think and buys more. He looked like he wanted to say something else and decided against it. That's another kind of respect. They pulled out at 7:39. The streets swallowed their sound before the frost had finished its steam. I poured a second coffee and let the kitchen absorb the new shape of the day. The house didn't feel smaller without the boxes. It felt truer. I put the notes to Michael and Jennifer into separate envelopes and addressed them in my careful print. I tucked Jennifer's into the top box labeled piano books, so she'd see it before she saw the title of the song she never learned to finish. I tucked Michael's into the jacket collar because finding a letter in a place you put your mouth makes it harder to lie to yourself about what you just read. At 8:12, my phone buzzed. A photo from Rodriguez. Michael's porch, the stack of boxes on the mat, the note in my handwriting visible like a signature you can't deny. The timestamp lined up like teeth. He wrote nothing else. He didn't have to. 4 minutes later, another photo. Jennifer's quarantines, the piano bench with a pulled box on top, her storm doors reflection tamp catching a woman's silhouette shaped like a decision she wasn't ready to make. The caption, a single checkmark. I set the phone face down and let the thought land. This is what it looks like when you give people exactly what they asked for and they discover that wanting is not the same as deserving. I cleaned the counter where the boxes had rested, streaks where cardboard had learned the shape of our house, and put the Albany envelope back into the safe, turned the dial, and listened for the click. Repressors respected the numbers I'd given them. At 8:33, the doorbell rang. I knew insistence of the knock before I looked through the peephole. Michael's knuckles make a sound like someone testing a wall. I left the chain on, opened the door the width of a father's patience, and met eyes I'd watched blink open the day he was born. "What is this?" he demanded, and held up his phone with troller of his steps, as if it were a verdict and not a photograph. "That," I said, "is your life being returned, McCorm." He barked a laugh. "So you think you're clever?" "Not particularly," I said, "but I'm awake." He wreckage on the door as if pressure could change hinges. "Open this," he said. I did, I said, and didn't. "You had my childhood trademarks delivered to my house. You think this is what this is, petty, Dad?" "I think it's accurate," I said. "Things that belong you should be at your house." He cursed softly the way men do when they're not ready to be the man they think they are. "This is insane." "Insane would be signing a paper I didn't read because my son told me reading was a waste of time," I said evenly. "Insane would be moving into a basement because the adults at a dinner I wasn't invited to decided I was a risk factor that could be mitigated with a kitchenette." His jaw clicked. I could see the argument he'd rehearsed this morning go off its rails. He regrouped, pulled out a paper, the letter of intent. Folded and unfolded enough to look tired. He pushed it through the gap so that it bent against the chain. "This is a good offer. You're being stubborn to prove a point." "Negligence worth proving," I said. "What? That you can't told what's best for you? Congratulations, message received." His mouth made a line I recognized from every game he lost when he was 7. "Do you realize how selfish this is?" "Selfish?" I repeated, not because I needed clarity, but because sometimes the of a word shames it into being honest. "We're trying to help you," he said, louder now. Volume, always the last tool of a man who has run out of others. "I had a buyer lined up before I finished my coffee," I said. "Yes," I said, I noticed. He took a breath that tried to be a reset. "Where are you going?" "You can call me at Siemens. I'll be available until 3. "Dad, 2 to 3, I repeated, and closed the door in a quake that didn't slam. The chain fell back against the jamb with a small sound that felt like a punctuation mark. He stood on the porch for the length of a pride, then left. His tires made a statement against the pavement that the street ignored. When his car turned the corner, the house relaxed in a way remotes do when the person breathing on them has stopped trying to make them smaller. At 9:05, Jennifer called. I answered. "Crimson," she said, and the word cracked. "What deserved?" "Returning what belongs to you," I said. "They're just boxes," she said, but she had never been able to lead just without swallowing glass. "They're reminders," I said, "and you don't have to keep them. You can throw them away." That's part of the lesson, too. Please don't be cruel, she said. Freeze, I'm not, I said, and knew it was true. I'm being economical. She was quiet long enough to make me think she'd hung up. Then, Sarah saw them. She asked me why her piano books were on the porch. What should I tell her? Familiarity, I said, and that learning to finish something is sometimes slower than wanting to. That's not fair, she said. And there it was, trash again. The word people use when an outcome refuses to match their intention. Fairness, I said, is a longer conversation we have today. I didn't hang up on her. I let the call end the way swing ends when you stop pushing, motion, deciding, not anger. When the line, quiet, the kitchen sounded bigger. The clock in Margaret's study sounded closer. Before noon, I drove to the bank. I moved a modest sum from the joint account Margaret and I had used for groceries into the travel account, with the card she called a dare. I left the balances otherwise undisturbed. There's a wisdom in not making the numbers dance just because you've learned a new step. I stood in line behind a man depositing cash with his hat in his hands and in front of a woman arguing with the teller about a fee she had probably agreed to and never read. The bank smelled like old carpet and counterfeit pens. I signed where the clerk told me to sign and left with my copy, which mattered to no one before mattered the most. Warped at the post office to check the box. Inside, a smaller envelope from Albany, with my name in the kind of ink that doesn't smear. I didn't open it in the parking lot. Not everything needs to be eaten hot. I slid it into the glove compartment, with the manual for a car I no longer trust to tell me the truth about its oil light. At home, I put the envelope next to Ism older brother on the desk and stood with my hands on either side of the wood, palms flat, fingers spread, like a man measuring something he intends to build. From paper to physical, the boxes had moved. People had been forced to carry parts of themselves that they had assumed I would keep holding. The next pieces would be quieter. Airline confirmations tucked where they couldn't be found by anyone looking for me on a shared family plan. Utilities scheduled for a future that did not require me to announce a forwarding address. Keys duplicated not because I am worried about being locked out, but because being locked crowned in is a different kind of trap I have no intention of entertaining. At 1:59, the phone rang. Michael, on time, because even pride, communicator, respects an appointment if it thinks it might get something out of it. Confiscated to 3, I said. He exhaled through his teeth. You've made your point. Affles, I said, but I'm on schedule. Like, what do you want? In prison. And finally, it was a question. I want Crimson to live in my house until I choose not to, I said. I want you to stop treating my no as a phase. I want your realtor to stop treating my address like a line item. I want you to learn the difference between help and control. Mikey let the silence do a little work then. And if I can't? You will, I said, because the alternative is smaller than even you want it to be. Suspicion is just fear in business casual. It means courts, I said. It means transcripts, recordings that sound worse in a courtroom than they did on my kitchen speaker. It means a judge asking you why you threatened conservatorship for a man who can quote his mortgage payoff date and the interest rate of his annuity from memory. 19? Actually ordered me? He snapped. I preserved unchecked a conversation, I said, because one day you always wish you had. Without didn't raise my voice, he didn't lower his, but something in his tone lost a layer of certainty. Butterflies. Freeze. When, I said, we don't talk about the house again. When you have something to discuss that isn't about its square footage, you call me on a Sunday after church and ask me if I'd like to meet you for pie, not because you think I need sugar, because you want to hear about the garden. Kay scoffed, but not with his whole mouth. Pie. Yes, I said. The kind that takes patience and pays you back slice by slice. We're done here, he said. For now, I said, and let the call end like a porch swing. Again. In the quiet that followed, I packed the one suitcase you trusted. Socks that know shirts that don't make me look like a man trying to be less old than he is. The shaving kit Margaret gave me on our 20th anniversary because she liked the smell of sandalwood. The photo of her on the beach, somehow still warmer than Shell's sun will ever be on my face again. The passport. The card she called a dare. I left the suitcase open on the bed in the guest room and went downstairs to the garden. The rosemary had been pruned. The apple tree would always need something. I cut 3 apples anyway, set them in a bowl on the Beth counter, and wrote a note to myself. In Hick back door. Water herb garden. Quay. Leave keys with Joyce in an envelope marked mail. Ragazziades are how men like me tell ourselves we're not dreaming when we're finally doing the thing we've been threatening to do. The doorbell rang again at 4:11. I knew the weight of these footsteps, lighter, quicker, the sound of someone still, hoping the conversation could be turned into something without sharp edges. Depending the door. Falsehood, I weigh, because there are moments when you give someone the dignity of access, even if you don't give them the thing they came for. She stood on the porch, with the box of piano books in her arms, and the note on top, like a sunburn she hadn't expected. I can't take this, she said, and lifted the box like proof. Play, already did, I said. Tears threatened the edges of her eyes, the way weather threatens a picnic. Don't do that, she said. Windshield, what? Turn everything into a line that sounds good, she said. Just, her voice day broke. Just tell me what you want me to learn. She had been my daughter for 37 years, and this was the first time, shrinking me that question without expecting the answer to be a ladder she could climb to wherever she had already decided she was going. I exhaled through my nose and felt something in my chest make room for something that wasn't anger. Keep what's yours, I said. Stop asking other people to store it for you. Don't confuse access with love. And if you want to be the person who brings things to the table, I nodded at the box, practice by carrying your own to the car. She blinked, surprised I knew where that lime came from. Then she held the box tighter and, to her credit, didn't ask for help down the steps. When she reached the bottom, she turned. Are we going to see you? Yes, I said. When I decide, I'll tell you. And when I say Sunday and pie, I'll mean it. She half laughed, half cried. Pie, she said, as if the word could hold everything we had failed to make of other words. Drive safe, I said, and closed the door softly. What you do when you've learned that loud doesn't add anything except echoes. In the evening, as the house folded itself into the moth-colored light that makes a man honest, I walked the rooms one more time. I touched the table where the tick marks measure height. I straightened the photograph of Margaret on the mantel, not because it was crooked, but because it made me feel like I could be useful to her in one last way. I locked the front door, left the porch light on, and set the Albany envelope, bombed, on the desk, where it could shape the air while I slept. Tomorrow would be the first day my children woke up with parts of themselves on their floors instead of mine. Tomorrow would be the day I bought apples in a place where the apples had not learned my grief. Tomorrow would be another day in a life I chose.
For now, it was enough to stand in my kitchen with clean counters and a bowl of fruit, and a plan that didn't need anyone else's permission to be real. By the time Saturday rolled around again, the house had learned my new quiet. It wasn't the hush of mourning anymore. It was the hush of a plan that had moved from paper to muscle. The boxes were gone. The table was clear. The Albany envelope sat in the safe like a low ember. Steady heat, no smoke. At 8:03 a.m., a text from Michael blinked onto the screen. "We're coming by at 10. Don't make this difficult." I typed nothing. I brewed coffee and watered the herb garden Margaret had coaxed through 3 winters like stubborn hope. I put apples in a bowl on the counter because Marie's message had made that small ritual feel like practice. Then I sat at the kitchen table and wrote 3 lines on the legal pad. 1. Breathe first. Disarm. 2. Ask questions they don't want to answer. Hear each other. We trick with family isn't volume, it's acoustics. At 9:59, I heard the familiar impatience of tires on gravel. Michael's SUV carries its weather with it. I opened the door before they could knock. He came in first, shoulders pitched forward, jaw set tight. Jennifer followed, cheeks pink from the cold, lips pressed like she was reclaimed something in that might break her teeth if it got out. No Sarah. The absence felt like a draft. "Morning," I said. "We need to settle this." Michael didn't sit. He paced, parking the length of the rug, like a man measuring a field for a fence that would be taller than the deed allowed. "Coffee, no?" I asked, because offering hospitality to people who have rehearsed hostility has a way of knocking the script out of their hands. "No," he snapped. "Yes, please," Jennifer said, and the words surprised her body. I poured her a cup. She stared at the steam as if it might tell her what to say next. I took my seat and let the chair make its honest creak. You said settle, Michael. That presumes a dispute. Let's be clear about what yours is." "The house," he said, as if the 2 words could duct into law. "You can't keep it. It isn't reasonable." "There is no mortgage," I said again, because repetition read him as sometimes obedience and sometimes a mirror. "Taxes, maintenance, safety," he fired back rapidly. "It's not sustainable." Kill the phrase like a handrail that had held his weight before. Jennifer's voice arrived softer. "Dad, we're worried about you falling, about you being alone." "You're worried about the house being mine," I said. "Those aren't the same worry." Michael stopped pacing. "We found another buyer, stronger number. We have a letter of intent." "You had," I said, and slid Peter's certified mail receipt across the table like a chess piece. "Your buyer has been notified that any further contact goes through counsel. There will be no sale." "Is ridiculous," he said. "You're forcing us. Say what you want out loud," I said calmly, "which is why you're angry." He stared at me, and for a flicker I saw the 7-year-old who hated that the bat was heavy, but hated more when I helped hold it. He pivoted to new ground. "If you won't be practical, we'll petition for conservatorship," Mind Fur flinched. She hadn't known he'd bring that word into this room again. She set her coffee down too carefully. "Then petition?" I said, and my voice surprised all press of us with its evenness. "You'll discover that judges prefer facts to feelings. Bring evidence. We'll bring recordings." Michael's mouth opened and closed. He didn't like the sound of himself when he wasn't the one playing the callback. Jennifer tried to catch the rope before he fell further. "We don't want to do any of this," she said. "We want you safe. We want you close." "The basement," I said. "In our home," she said. A plea underneath, flutter, the performance. I repeated, "Let's be precise." Silence stretched just long enough to make the next sound count. I reached for my phone, set it in the center of the table, and tapped the speaker icon. "We should include Sarah," I said. "She belongs in any conversation about her tuition and my house."
Jennifer's hand shot out. Don't drag her into this. Revenge, she's already in it, I said. She just doesn't know which part of the story is true. She's in class, Michael huffed. It's Saturday, I said, and dialed. Kang sounded leather larger in the room, because nobody breathed. Hi, Grandpa. Non-zero answered on the second ring, the bright morning in her voice. I was just about to call you. Hey, kiddo, I said gently, and looked at Jennifer, who looked down. I've got your mom and your Uncle Michael here on speaker. We're at my kitchen table. I wanted us to talk together. Yeah, she said, the vowel changing shape as it moved through her. Okay. How's school? Because I have learned that starting MX with the non-essential is often the only way to keep a bridge from burning before anyone crosses it. Fine, she said. And then, because she is not yet old enough to have forgotten hard truth, why are we talking about the house? Submerged. No, I said. Then why are we talking about it? She said. And it's so that Jennifer's hand went to her mouth, as if she could keep a sound from escaping that had already escaped. Crimson, Michael started. We're helping your Grandpa Thane think through. I raised a hand. He couldn't see but felt. Subtract, I said. Have you gotten my monthly Treffenfers? Kidnapping. Quiet. What? Undermine $500 I've been sending you since freshman year, I said. Every month. You get them, right? Unrecognized lay between us with weight. What money? So I wanted to stand unchecked and find a way to rewire time, arbitrarily at Jennifer yet. I kept my eyes on the bowl of apples because they were honest. Your account that ends in 3842, I said. Direct deposit on the second business day of each month. Sarah's breath hitched in my kitchen like she was the one sitting at this table. Told me that was... She stopped. The sentence had nowhere to go. I thought that was them helping. I wanted you to have what you needed without having to ask, I said. Books, dues, whatever made school feel less like a fight. Michael's palm slapped the table. Dad, this is exactly why we need to have this conversation together, I said, not looking at him. On the thrown end, Sarah made a sound that was undie and human and made the whole room lean. Maiden? Laura closed her eyes. Emily, sweetheart. She looked at me then, pleading not to be made to restrain it. For once, I let the silence be a mercy, not a tool. My transfer's unchecked to 12,000, I said quietly into the phone. 24 months, 500 at a time. It's not everything. It's not nothing. Sarah started to cry. Not the performative kind that asks for a camera, but the kind that leaks out of your actual body when a story breaks open and light rushes into a room that's been closed too long. I'm so sorry, she said, breathless, to a person she had thought recognized. Grandpa, why didn't you tell me? Yormized, parliamentary, asked me not to, I said. She said it would unleashed. Complicate who? Sarah asked. Complicate what? No one answered her because no one could answer her without changing their shape in front of themselves. I looked at Jennifer, not to punish, but because the person who needs to speak should be the one who made the speech necessary. She met my eyes like a student who has finally realized the exam is not multiple choice. I didn't want you to, she swallowed, to feel like you owed him. I wanted you to think we... Flushing credit, Sarah said, through tears. Merciless, in the way truth is when it's still red.
You wanted me to keep calling you a hero. Jennifer's face folded.
Sarah, baby, no, I wanted.
Roll, I said softly, because it is sometimes a presumptionness to name the thing that is eating everyone's time. Michael stood, couldn't find a place to put his height, and sat again. This is not how we do this, he said to no one who could help him. You don't solve this on a phone call. You started it on a phone call, I said, not unkind. Sarah sniffed hard. Grandpa, are you okay?
Imprisoned out at the apple tree and watched a small winter bird land on a branch like punctuation. I'm fine, kiddo.
You don't sound fine, she said. I sound decided, I said. There's a difference. She inhaled like she was going to decide in front of all of us. I'm coming over.
Sarah said too fast.
Yes, space, yes, I said calm. But not today. Today you go for a walk. You buy yourself something hot that does not come with a grade. Then you call me tomorrow, when the world is less loud inside your head. When she surprised me by listening. Okay, she whispered, I love you. I love you too, I said, then added, because it mattered. For renown, not your report card. The line clicked off. The room felt larger because the truth had taken up the space it was owed. Jennifer pressed her palms to her eyes the way people do when they think darkness will rearrange the furniture. I didn't mean to. She stopped because the rest of that sentence knows it is a lie. I thought if she knew, it would change how she looked as Lise at you, or how she looked at me. I wanted to protect your story, I said gently. You wanted to protect the version where you fix everything. Michael found his footing in anger again, the floor he trusts most. So this is the plan. Humiliate us, make us the villains, keep the house and your pride. You done? Yes, I said with that part. Here's what comes next. Hans slid a single sheet across the table, the same list I'd shown them with the lawyers, written again in my hand, jectives. There is power in watching a man write the rules he intends to follow. 1. I'm not selling my home. 2. I am not moving into your basement. 3. I will support Sarah directly as I see fit. If that support is interfered with or misrepresented, it ends. Jennifer flinched, last line, like it had teeth. Please, she said. Just that word. It's a better word when it arrives before the problem. I'm not your enemy, I said, and watched it either land or not. Michael pushed away from the table and stood so fast his chair bit the rug. He looked at the apples as if they'd insulted him. Congratulations, he said. You win. This isn't, I said. Everything is, he said and walked to the door. Michael, I called. He stopped. When Wilmington talked to your realtor again, tell him to stop sending naked letters to my porch. My porch is for people who know my first name. He left without answering. Silence closed behind him like a well-oiled door. Jennifer stayed. The coffee had cooled into a mirror she didn't like. I don't know how to fix this, she whispered. And for the 10th time, I believed her. She wasn't angling. She was tired. You won't, I said. Not today. Maybe not by yourself. She nodded, small, as if agreeing with gravity. Dad, are you going somewhere? Yes, I said. Not today. Not to a basement. Her eyes searched my face for a hint I would not give her. The plan requires respect for its privacy. Will you tell me when? When I'm ready, I said. And when I do, it won't be a negotiation. The wind picked up outside. The apple tree made a soft shiver on the glass like a hand. She stood. Can I come by tomorrow? With Sarah? Yes, I said. But you leave money at the door. We talk like people who love each other, not like accountants.
A quarter-small smile found pie, she said, trying the word on like a distrust she wasn't sure she could afford. Pie, I said. Sunday. After she neuroscienced, the house exhaled. I collected the ritis and washed them slowly, paying attention to the way, trained, the ceramic changes sound when the coffee leaves it. I dried them and put them back on the shelf in their spots, the same spots Margaret had chosen. I believed. At noon, a new voicemail, the realtor, an apology shaped like a threat.
We didn't mean to cause stress, Mr. Harrison, but if you reconsider this market...
All notices delivered, no further contact except written.
Good work today.
I put the phone face down again, not to avoid the world, but to give the house the courtesy of my undivided presence. I walked the rooms once more with unhurried steps. Margaret's study, the chair where her elbows had made their permanent hollows, the legal pad with my morning's list. I wrote one more line at the bottom. 4. Choose when to leave. Leave like a gentleman. Minimized. It would not be an exit under the cover of shame. It would be a departure at the hour of my choosing, announced with the dignity of a man who had built a life in full and was not asking permission to keep it. Late afternoon, I called Marie. She answered, undermined on the second ring, like people do, who mean what they say about being available. Soon, I said. Erupted windows, she replied, as if that were the most important job in the world. Maybe it was. Fresh linens, I said, because saying the world, holidays from Elise changed to ofter sends. Fresh linens, I said, because if you wasn't mental handles, leaves. Fresh linens, I said, because if you wasn't mental handles and you should have'n, am well said. Fresh linens, I said, because if you wasn't mental handles, am well said. Fresh linens, I said, because if you wasn't mental handles, am well said. Fresh linens, I said, because if you wasn't mental handles, am well said. Fresh linens, I said, because if you wasn't mental handles, am well said. Fresh linens, I said, because if you wasn't mental handles, am well said. Fresh linens, I said, because if you wasn't mental handles, am well said. Fresh linens, I said, because if you wasn't mental handles, am well said. Fresh linens, I said, because if you wasn't mental handles, am well said. Fresh linens, I said, because if you wasn't mental handles, am well said. Fresh linens, I said, because if you wasn't mental handles, am well said. Fresh linens, I said, because if you wasn't mental handles, am well said. Fresh linens, I said, because if you wasn't mental handles, am well said. Fresh linens, I said, because if you wasn't mental handles, am well said. Fresh linens, I said, because if you wasn't mental handles, am well said. Fresh linens, I said, because if you wasn't mental handles, am well said. Fresh linens, I said, because if you wasn't mental handles, am well said. Fresh linens, I said, because if you wasn't mental handles, am well said. Fresh linens, I said, because if you wasn't mental handles, am well said. Fresh linens, I said, because if you wasn't mental handles, am well said. Fresh linens, I said, because if you wasn't mental handles, well said. Fresh linens, I said, because if you wasn't mental handles, well said. Fresh linens, I said, because if you wasn't mental handles, well said. Fresh linens, I said, because if you wasn't mental handles, well said. Fresh linens, I said, because if you wasn't mental handles, well said. I ate slowly. Not because the food deserved it, but because my life did. I rinsed the plate, dried it, and set it in its place. The TV stayed off. The clock ticked in honest seconds. I sat a while with the blue folder open to Margaret's note. If you're reading this, you need to know what's inside. Kennedy, even though I now know more than the note had told me, I placed my hand on it like a benediction, fuffled. Thank you. I didn't say it out loud because some thank yous are better kept between skin and wood. Before bed, I wrote 2 emails. One to Peter, confirming I'd be unreachable. Symmetry, for a few days starting midweek and authorizing him to field all communications with the kids' council. The second to Joyce next door, asking if she'd collect the Mora spell and water the herbs if the week ran dry. Ryan set aside the spare Joyce, mail, and herbs and tucked it into the drawer by the front door. Practicality is the bow you tie on clarity. We in the dark, I lay awake long enough to hetch the house settle. A soft tick in the vent. The particular sigh the east rack wall ray makes when the temperature the windows. A fox moved through the sleeping treadmillards like a rumor. I thought about Sarah's breath catching through the speaker. I thought about Jennifer asking, "What do you want me to learn?" I thought about Michael's jaw and how a man can wear it like armor and still be pierced by a single quiet sentence. When sleep finally came, it wasn't a bargain, it was anchored. Morning would bring pie and sundae and maybe a small conversation where a girl became a woman by telling the truth to herself in front of people who loved her. Soon after would come a ticket, a bag, a door closed behind me. That wasn't about leaving so much as it was about arriving. Bowl of apples, the legal pad with 4 lines, and a house that had made unthinkable room for the next chapter without needing to watch me write it. Airports are designed to make you feel interchangeable. That's their trick, their mercy, their insult. 1,000 pedestrians, parts, all humming to the same hour, and you are just another amber with shoes in a bin. JFK smelled like pretzels and disinfectant. The gate agent smiled the way you smile at an assembly line. I handed over my passport and watched the scanner confirm I existed. On the plane, I took the aisle. I used to take the window when Margaret and I flew together. She liked the horizon to make sense beneath her, the neat geometry of fields and neighborhoods and rivers, braided like hair you didn't want to cut. Alone, the aisle feels honest, a small mercy you can stand when your blood insists. I didn't talk to the man beside me. He had the earnest face of a traveler who wants to confess his itinerary to a stranger, so the world will confirm his good choices. We exchanged nods, and he blessed us both by opening a book. I closed my eyes and tried the shape of sleep. It fit for a while. In the stretch of darkness over the Hudson Valley, the cabin lights dimmed to a hush, and the plane became a congregation, a row of people in permissioned ignorance. We do not know the pilot's heart rate. We do not know what winter does to metal at this height. We do not know how the engines keep insisting, and yet the insistence holds. That's belief with a timetable. Somewhere above the Catskills, I thought of Sarah at the kitchen table, the sound her breath made day when a story broke open. I thought of Jennifer on the porch with a box of her piano books. I thought of Michael's knuckles against my door, the way pride makes a dull Pirtle's percussion. I thought of Margaret writing her tidy block letters on a sticky note and trusting me to read. When the flight attendant asked if I wanted breakfast, I told her no. She leaned in anyway and set a cup of coffee on my tray. "You look like a man who drinks the coffee," she said with a kindness paved that wasn't performative. I did. Albany arrived under us with white squares and blue glints, a mosaic you could live inside. The runway was a strip of certainty between two doubts, and the tires took it like a promise they intended to keep. The plane exhaled, so did I. Customs was a line of people practicing patience in different languages. When it was my turn, the officer, a young woman face, stamped my passport and said, "Welcome home." It is a quiet sort of welcome when the stamp hits paper. Proof on 2 pages that you've crossed something invisible and been allowed. Outside the sliding doors, the Adirondack air had the temperature of a good handshake, cool at first, warm a second later. A woman stood a few yards away holding a piece of paper with my name printed in capital letters, as if someone had spelled me. She was compact, hair tucked into a low knot, a navy sweater that didn't announce itself. When she saw me see her, her whole face changed shape, less smile, and more like the return of something she hadn't known she had misplaced. "Mr. Harrison," she said, and stepped forward. "Marie," I said. She didn't hesitate, and I was grateful for it. She hugged me as if it were not rude to do so in a place where travelers are supposed to be neutral. Her shoulders smelled faintly of pine and laundry. "You're Margaret," she said when she let me, screened, go. "Would be angry if I did not whipped you this way." Angry and Margaret in the same sentence made me laugh. She'd pretend to be, I said, and then later she'd say deflate out loud like a prayer. Marie nodded as if she'd been in our kitchen when those small liturgies were invented. "Come," she said, and led me toward a small, unregister of a cloud that means rain but decides against it. We drove without wasting sentences. The highway offered small hills and big sky. Wood houses were scattered on the slopes like thoughtful decisions. Here and there, a ruin held its shape out, of respect instead of strength. Marie pointed when pointing mattered. "There," she said at one intersection, "fresh bread in the mornings. Story you will not need, but it comforts to know." When we left the main road and the pavement narrowed into something that made you pay attention, she slowed. "Maples," she said, as if they were people I should meet properly. "The old ones remember." We turned into a lane with stone walls, the height of a good boundary. Wild roses poured over them like the kind of pink that makes you excuse extravagance. She did it with the unshowy confidence of someone who always arrives where she means to. "Home," she said, and looked at me, not to gauge my reaction, but to share it. The cabin was smaller than my house in the suburbs, and bigger than the one I had tried to shrink. Wood walls, green shutters that made innest, a metal roof that had learned tongue in storms. It wasn't a showpiece. It was a place that had been asked to be a place and had answered yes. Marie took a key from her sweater pocket and placed it in my hand with 2 fingers. The key was brass, warm, heavy for its size. "This here's yours," she said, "in law and in what matter says." I didn't say thank you, not out of rudeness, but because some thanks should be saved for when you can keep them. Inside, the floor was cool under shoes. The living room open to light without asking permission. A simple couch the color of sand, a wooden table with 4 chairs, meant for 4 people who could eat and mean it, built-in shelves to hold books, a small kitchen tiled in blues that repeated the lake's ideas. Cast iron pans hung above the stove in a way that made work look like art and art look like work. A bowl sat on the counter with apples that knew what they were doing. Nieri moved around the rooms with the soft theater of a good host, not to show off but to make knowing easier. Linens, she said, gesturing to a closet that's met a turn. New mattress, she added, tapping the edge of a bed, think that seemed to forgive the bodies that had already slept in it. Windows, she said, and opened one so the air treason could behave the way air does when you tell it the truth. A small deck waited beyond the kitchen, pine underfoot, iron rail painted the kind of green you get only by not hurrying. Past the railing, Lake George said all the measles it always says, even to people who don't listen. Keep moving, keep changing, keep showing up. Marie placed a hand flat on the table the way you steady a child and then let go. The law firm in Albany sent confirmation, she said. I collected it yesterday at the post office, as we arranged. It's in the drawer. We can sign where the arrow points. I know the arrows, no problema. She smiled at my face. Do not worry, she translated, even though she knew I had immunity. I opened the drawer. The envelope was the legal sort that takes itself seriously. Inside, stamped signatures, a tidy explanation that a Rosai cabin is a cabin, and a man is the man allowed to decide about it. Underneath, a single page that named Marie as caretaker, with authority to call electricians, masons, plumbers, and to pay them without asking presumption if I truly meant to fix what needed fixing. Margaret's handwriting in the corner of a photocopy. Trust her. Sit, Marie said, and placed a pen in my hand. I sat. I signed. It felt less like claiming and more like finally agreeing with what had been true for longer than I knew. Narcotics, she said, with a nod that, whereas I dismissed the paperwork, to the small room where it belongs. You eat, and then you sleep. Kings, I'm not hungry, I said. Nee, you are, she said, and carried from the kitchen a plate with bread that did not need adjectives, and a small dish of something green and clean, oil with herbs, salt you could taste in your teeth. I tore, I dipped, I ate, and discovered I had been myself about hunger since Margaret died. You rest, she said, when the plate was lighter. Stay, I said, surprising us both. She shook her head. I live 3 houses away, she said. If I stay, I will tidy, and if I tidy, you will feel like you do normalized live here. Her sweater and set on the table a small cell phone that looked indestructible. This is the house phone. Only 4 numbers saved. Mine, the Albany office, the plumber, and the man who brings fish on Fridays. You will remember the fish. What about my American phone? Asked. In a way that made me feel known. Turn off, she said gently. You need to be here to be here. After she left, I took her advice. Placed my American phone in a drawer with the Albany envelope, not as punishment, but as a truce. I walked the rooms with the same quiet method I had used in my suburban house. But this walkthrough didn't catalog what would stay and what would go. It asked what belonged where. Margaret would have liked the question. The bedroom faced a small road where the wind learned to behave itself. A bowl on the dresser held 2 smooth stones the size of a man's decision. I put Sarah's crayon star from Christmas in the back of the bowl so its glitter could misbehave quietly. The bathroom had a window that let the lake announce the hour and a towel that trusted air. I set my razor on the sink and thought of the sandalwood scent Margaret loved. I reminded myself to buy a bar in town, not because I needed to smell like memory, but because some memories redhead deserve company. When sleep came, it did what Marie promised. to noon light and the sound of plates somewhere, not mine. For a while, I lay there and let the foreign familiarity of the ceiling teach me a new map. The mattress forgave me for my age when I stood. The tile was cool. The mirror caught my face and did not accuse. I walked to the market Marie had pointed at with her palm. The path took me past 3 houses that were not embarrassed by their age. A woman in a doorway beat dust from a rug with a rhythm that made sense. A cat considered me and withheld judgment. 2 boys chased a ball that had more miles in it than my truck. The market kept its promises. Bread that would have insulted a plastic bag sat in paper sleeves. Olives, like good punctuation, glistened in a shallow bin. A man behind the counter asked me a question in what I guessed was French-Canadian, and I answered with a smile. He chose a loaf for me and handed it over like a handshake. Merci, I said, and he nodded, as if I had, Bola, a small exam. When back at the cabin, I sliced the bread with a knife that had learned it was a partner and not a weapon. I ate standing at the counter because new places ask you to stand for a little while before they allow you to sit. I took the bread and an apple and 2 cups to the deck and finally sat. The lake kept talking. I listened. Sometime in the late afternoon, Marie returned. She knocked, quitting the way a person does who understands doors. "You are awake," she said, approving, as if I had learned to breathe on schedule. "I am," I said. "Do you have time to tell me the story? Margaret said you owed her your life. Did that thing eyes do when a memory insists without asking if now is a good time?" She sat across from me. "I was 20, she said. I thought I married a good man." She shrugged. "He was good at being charming. That is different." I nodded because the difference is most of what the second half of a life teaches you. "When he left," she went on, "he left a mess, not just came money paper. Debt someone had put in my name. Lies that stick. Your wife came to the cafe where I worked and asked me if I had a lawyer. I laughed. Lawyer for a girl who served coffee? She looked at me like I was saying something rude about her friend. "You have me," she said. I told her I could Baron. She said, "You can cut my hair. I am not a hairdresser. Mercy of the past." She went with me to the office in town. She introduced me to a woman who could make the paper behave. She sat with me while I signed. She made the woman explain every line twice. She wrote notes on the notes. "Sleeker," I said. "She saved my name," Marie said, and her voice went soft in a way it had not yet. "And when my mother was sick, your wife brought soup and made the bed, and told my proud mother that she needed practice before she could help Americans correctly. Your wife let people keep their dignity. That is more than money. Me let quiet sit with us for a while, the way one invites a good nuptial to the porch. When she asked me to keep this cabin ready," Marie said finally, "I promised, like a person Chattanooga promises, when she knows what she is saying yes to. I check the shutters. I open the windows when the rain ends. I change the sheets so the bed does not forget being useful. It is not work," she added. "It is," she searched, clang for a word. "Guarding." "Thank you," I said, and meant gratitude at a lamb of bone. "We will go for dinner," she said, standing, switching registers the way people do who refuse to make their kindness an event. "The cafe by the square. They know your name as the husband of Margaret. You will correct them. You will say, 'I am Robert.' And then you will say, 'I am Robert, who was Margaret's husband.' Both truths can fit." We walked to the square in the hour when the day forgives itself. Light caught on the wine glasses and the edges of conversation. The cafe tables held people who were not in a hurry to finish being alive. Marie greeted the owner the way you greet a person who doesn't need to be reminded where he is. He brought a soup that didn't apologize for being simple, and fish that made me feel like my mouth had been too noisy for too many months. "Wine?" he asked. "Half," Marie said to him. Then to me, "So you sleep." I slept anyway, back at the cabin. I stood on the deck and made ritual out of nothing. I placed an apple on the table and rolled it with my palm until the scent lifted. I pressed my fingertip into the skin just enough to make the air tell stories. I closed my eyes and saw Margaret sitting where I stood, ankles crossed. Book in her lap, she would pretend to read while watching people be human. I didn't talk to her. The lake did enough of that for both of us. The next morning, I woke early and took the alley Aura Marie had mapped for me to the bakery. An old man set chairs out front with a care that suggested he believed in the day but knew it needed proof. I bought 2, carried them home in a paper bag that made a gentle noise, and ate them on the deck, unborn, with coffee that finally remembered how it wanted to taste. I wrote a letter to Sarah that I did not intend to send. I am learning the names of things that do not need me to pronounce them well, for them to keep being themselves. I told her about the cat 2 houses down who pretends to own the path, and the way the neighbor hangs laundry with a rhythm like a song you only hear when you're quiet. I told her the lake is louder at night, but kinder in the morning. I told her I had a seat for her if she wanted to test that theory herself. Professionnel finished, I folded the paper and unleashed it under the bowl of apples, like ballast. Tre's a defiance in writing what you don't intend to mail. It makes you honest without demanding an audience. By late morning, the village had learned me. The woman with the rug nodded with the respect you give the persistent. The boys with the ball included me in the grammar of their game by pretending not to. Marie texted me a single word, linens, and I answered with a picture of the bed made. We were learning each other all. I lulled Peter on the house per phone because international plans are for people who think they won't go home. Everything's in order, he said. Your porch has been in Yahoo. Good, I said. Let it be. Shall a claim forward anything I receive from your children's counsel? Yes, I said, to my post office box. And to the fish man on Friday, erection. He laughed the way a man laughs when he's relieved to be included in a joke that is not at anyone's expense. After I hung up, I turned my American phone on for the first time in 2 days. A stack of messages arrived, like a weather report from another country. Michael, 3 texts, 2 voicemails. Jennifer, 1 text that said Pie Sunday, and then, after a day, we came, you were gone. Sarah, a single message with a heart and a question mark. I wrote back to her alone. I'm safe. I'm where your grandmother wanted me to be. When you're ready, I have a chair waiting, in the drawer again. It would wait. The mountains wait well. As dusk settled, Marie walked up the lane, acknowledgement, and leaned on the gate the way people do when they have decided a threshold should be a seat. Turbulence, she said. Markets in town. We buy bowls, printedly, you do not need, but that will make soup taste like it belongs. I have a weakness for bowls, I said. You have a weakness for things that hold, she corrected. And I decided Cole to let that land where it should. Nia. When she left, I did the small chores that make a place your responsibility. Rinsed dishes, wiped counters, shook crumbs into a palm, and gave them to the plants. I stood at the sink and looked at the apple tree someone had taught to be domestic, and thought of my apple tree, on the other side of the country, probably complaining about the wind. There is pride in plants that learn to stay in place. There is pride, too, in men who learn to move. Before sleep, I took Margaret's photograph from my wallet and set it on the bedside table. It looked right there in a way it had never quite looked right anywhere else since she left. I turned off the light and listened to the lake, and thought about how sound can be a wall and a door at the same time. I chose the door. In the morning, I would buy bowls and salt, hammer, and words for thank you that would feel less like performing and more like agreeing. Soon after, I suspected there would be the kind of ring from my American phone that you answer not because you have to, but because you've decided your voice is better in the conversation than the silence you leave behind. Fireplace. I let the Adirondacks teach me the shape of a day that does not ask me to justify it. I slept, and when I dreamed, the cabin did not scold me for leaving the lights on. It just held.